Hello, we're working on the second semester final for intermediate algebra. Let's start with question 1. A blank equation is one that can be written in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a is not 0. That's called a quadratic equation. Number 2. The graph of the quantity x plus h squared plus k has a vertex at hk. Number 3, the process of writing a quadratic equation so one side is a perfect square triangle is called a completing the square. Number 4, the process of writing a radical expression as an equivalent expression but without a radical in the denominator is called rationalizing. Now we're to some of the problems here. If we are adding these two polynomials together, we have to add the ones with like exponents together. So 8x squared plus 4x, or 9x to the 6th plus 4x to the 6th gives me 13x to the 6th. 6x to the 5th plus 6x to the 5th gives me 12x to the 5th, and then plus 3. For number 6, here we're subtracting them, so 7x squared minus 4x squared gives me 3x squared. 8x minus nothing gives me 8x. And negative 8 minus positive 4 gives me negative 12. In this next section, we're finding the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor that divides into 14x to the 4th and 56x to the 9th is 14x to the 4th, because 14 divides into 56 and x to the 4th divides into x to the 9th. For number 8, we're looking for the greatest common factor of all four of these. It's going to be the smallest value exponent of x is x to the 1st, and the smallest y value is y to the 3rd. For number 9, if we're factoring out the greatest common factor, my greatest common factor would be 12x. If I factor 60x cubed with the 12x, I get 5x squared. And of course, 12x divided by 12x is 1. For number 10, our greatest common factor that we can factor out of both of those looks like a 4, an x, and a y. If I divide my first term by 4xy, I get 5x to the 5th plus 28 divided by 4 is 7. The x's cross out, and I'm left with y squared. For number 11, where we have four terms, we're going to group the first two together and group the second two together. The greatest common factor of the first grouping looks like I can take a y out, leaving me with x squared minus 36. The second grouping, it looks like I can take out a negative 3, leaving me with x squared minus 36. I'm going to regroup that as x squared minus 36 times y minus 3. There's the y, there's the 3. This binomial here is still factorable into x plus 6 and x minus 6. I'm bringing my y minus 3 down. For number 12, my greatest common factor is going to be 3x times the quantity of y squared minus 25. This y squared minus 25 can be factored into y plus 5 and y minus 5. For number 13, again we have the four terms. We're going to factor the first two and the second two, grouping that way. Taking the 5 out, I get x plus 10. Taking the y out, I get x plus 10 again. By regrouping this, I'm going to have x plus 10 times the quantity of 5 plus y. For number 14, again we have four terms. We're going to factor the first two together and the second two together. My greatest common factor of my first grouping is y, and I get x plus 1. My second grouping gives me a 9, and I get an x plus 1. Rewriting that, I get x plus 1 times the quantity of y plus 9. For number 15, again we have 4 terms. We're going to take the greatest common factor of my first grouping. I get 3 times the quantity y minus 8. Second grouping, I can take out an x, leaving me with y minus 8. Rewriting that again, I get y minus 8 times the quantity of 3 plus x. In number 16, we have a cubic. Again, the only thing we know how to do when there's 4 terms is group the first 2 together and the second 2 together. So I'm going to take my greatest common factor of my first grouping is x squared, leaving me with x plus 5. The only thing that I can get out of my second grouping is a 1 with an x plus 5. Rewriting that, I get x plus 5 times the quantity of x squared plus 1. I'm going to leave this x squared plus 1 because we're not factoring it into imaginary numbers yet. Number 17. If I factor this, the factors of negative 30 that add up to 1 is x plus 6 and x minus 5. For number 18, the factors of negative 77 that add up to negative 4 are x minus 11 and x plus 7. For number 19, where we have a coefficient in front of our x squared term, I'm going to use the never fail, which is a times c gives me negative 10. The factors of negative 10 that add up to negative 3 are negative 5 and positive 2. So I'm going to replace my middle terms with that, and I'm going to have 2x squared minus 5x plus 2x minus 5. Group the first 2 together, group the last 2 together. My greatest common factor for my first grouping is x times the quantity of 2x minus 5. The second one is 1, 2x minus 5. Rewriting that, I get 2x minus 5 times the quantity of x plus 1. For number 20, it's the difference of squares pattern. So the square root of the first term goes in both front positions. Square root of the last term goes in both back positions. One is positive, one is negative. For number 21, we have the sum of cubes pattern, which is the cube root is the first one, cube root of the second one. Square that first term, multiply them together, opposite sign, and then square the last term. Remember, these signs use the acronym SOAP. Same, opposite, always positive. We'll do the same thing for number 22. Cube root of the first thing, cube root of the last thing, square the first one, multiply it together, use the opposite sign, and then square the last one. Same thing for 23. I get 8 minus x, 8 squared, multiply them together, opposite sign, square the last one. In this one, I think we're going to take the greatest common factor out. Looks like 6 will come out, leaving me with 27x cubed plus 125. When I factor that, the 6 stays out front. Cube root of the first term gives me 3x. Cube root of the last thing is 5. Square the first thing, multiply them together, opposite sign, and square my last thing. For number 25, same pattern again. Cube root of the first thing is 10x. Cube root of the last thing is 9. Square that first term, gives me 100x squared. Multiply them together, opposite sign, and then square the last one.